Hello, class. Today we're going to talk about the first of our 45 presidents, okay, which is George Washington. Okay, so I have this set up for each president from top line information. So George Washington was born February 22nd, 1732, and he died December 14th, 1799. He was 67. So his home state is going to be Virginia. Well, 4 of the first 5 U.S. presidents are going to be from Virginia. Virginia is going to really be overrepresented there. He previously, before he is going to be involved in the Revolution, he was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses. Religion. So he would go to church sometimes with his wife, Martha. And she had been involved with the Church of England, which later becomes the Episcopal Church in the United States. But his religious views are a bit less clear. He was at the very least a deist. This is a very trendy thing at the time. Belief in God, but not in a God that was actively involved in the day-to-day lives of people, and was definitely not all the elements of Christianity go with it. Well, he's best known as a part of a military leader. So he was a lieutenant colonel of the Virginia Regiment for the British in the French Indian War, or outside the United States, we call the 7 Years' War. He was actually somewhat instrumental in the start of that conflict himself when he was only 21 years old. Later, though, he's going to be commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. And part of why this happens is that when he's meeting with the Continental Congress, he shows up in his old uniform for the Virginia Regiment. And it can't have fit him very well. It can't have been very comfortable. But it was sending a very overt sign. Now, George Washington, though, always liked it to seem very modest, as sometimes he was. And so he said he humbly accepted the charge of being commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. But he himself is, he was showing up in military uniform. He hadn't worn in a decade. And you could argue, though, that some of his instincts as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army helped get independence. So when it comes to political party, he officially has none. This was very in vogue at the beginning of our country, and George Washington was a huge believer in this, to be above partisanship, above political parties. And he warned about this type of fighting in his farewell address. However, the factions that develop during his term of the Federalists and what today we call the Democratic Republicans, Washington had a very clear tendency to side with the Federalist versus the Democratic Republicans. So there are a lot of people today that are registered independents, but have a tendency to very more often vote for Republicans and Democrats, or the other way around. Washington would have been a registered independent, but when push came to shove, he governed like a Federalist. His term of office is April 30th, 1789 to March 4th, 1797. Now, that might seem like a weird start time, April 30th, and it is. This had to do with waiting for states to get the Constitution ratified. That election in 1788 went into 1789. And so he has, if you look at how the longest serving presidents, there's this giant tie of people with 2 terms, and Washington's below them because he started a little late. Now, At the beginning of our country, there's no term limits, and Washington could certainly have run for a third term. Now, if you look at his death date, it's quite possible he would not have survived that term. But he decided to step down, and this is an original precedent, to show the world an example of a peaceful transition of power. Now, of course, the peaceful transition of power went to his vice president, John Adams. And Washington did not have a very long retirement. Some of the stuff that they did when he got sick in 1799 may have actually hastened his demise. So this is the first of my kind of short recaps on each of the presidents with George Washington. Next